I like your background, by the way, Monique.
You. I got that designed a while ago so it can match my branding.
Also, I'm loving your book.
Oh, are you reading it or
I've,
listening?
I've been reading it because
I
I've
gotta
been
get
like,
it
I've been
free.
marking it.
Oh, I appreciate that. I'll send you a code though if you want to listen like while you're working out because I know it's hard for me to sit there and get through a whole book. I'm like I'll stop and bookmark it, then listen while I'm at the gym, then come back. I go
Yeah,
back.
it's one book I just finished. It took me months to finish that book. It was a great book, but
I
it
already know. Busy. Yeah, I'll send you a free code when we get off. Let me add that to my so that you can do both.
yeah, I'm really enjoying it.
Thank you. You'll learn a lot about me reading that. Some some childhood stories and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really good. It's very encouraging. So are you doing like do you do like book talks or whatever, like any of those sort of events?
Yeah, I did a speaking engagement at Northwestern University in July that covered how to get comfortable with confrontation, which is step 4 in the book.
Hmm.
And I'm building like signature talks so that I can go different places and leverage the book and pull lessons out of it and help people get through that. So I have some other ideas that I might knock on your door for that I think you would be great to help with. But that's I'm full of ideas and I need execution time. So
Oh
there's
yes.
Awesome. Well, sorry to interrupt you guys. I'm gonna get us started here today, and so I'd like to thank everyone for hopping on. Today, we are going to be talking about the power of storytelling in today's media landscape. And we'd like to thank Center for Rural Affairs for sponsoring our webinar series. So we just have a quick video here um, to play. In just one second here, I remembered I did not share my sound. Okay.
Hello, and thank you for joining today's webinar, sponsored by the Center for Rural Affairs. My name is Nikki Chitwood, and I'm the Panhandle Loan Specialist. As one of the many services we provide, I am here to introduce to you our lending services. When a bank can't help you with your dreams of homeownership or growing a business, the Center for Rural Affairs can. We offer coaching and financing to help you become a homeowner and start or grow a sustainable business. Please feel free to contact me at 308-631-0157, or you can visit cfra.org for more information.
Awesome. A great resource to check out. And so we'd like to thank them for being a partner with Grow Nebraska. We'd also like to thank Great Plains Communication. They're our featured sponsor for the month of November. And they're a really great partner of Grow Nebraska as well. And then also our featured member for November is Market 23, and they've been a member of Grow Nebraska since 2020. And then very quickly, if you wanted to scan the QR code, I'll also plan to send this in the chat. If you're a Nebraska entrepreneur, if you could just take part in this survey with the Nebraska DED and BDC and SourceLink, just letting them know. It's just a quick 5 to 10 minute survey to find out a little bit more about your business. And then I'd also like to promote our upcoming trainings. December 4th, we have Reach Customers Online with Maria. And then we were going to have a PayPal training later in the afternoon today, but unfortunately, due to some technical difficulties, we had to reschedule. And so that date is to be determined. And then you can scan the QR code here, and I'll also send a link in the chat. And then also I'd like to promote that we are a Grow with Google partner. And so that is who does our Google trainings the first Wednesday of each month. And then now we're going to get to our wonderful speakers, Monique and Taylor, and they're going to talk to us about storytelling. And so I'll let you guys take it away.
Good afternoon. I'll jump in, Tanya. If it's okay, I think that I need permission to share my screen so that we can get our PowerPoint that Taylor and I worked on to get ready for this afternoon's audience. And while you're granting me share access, let me try that one more time. Can you all see my screen?
I can see it.
Okay, I didn't want you to see the whole like messy part of the screen, so let me see if I can do that again.
I think we can all identify with having a lot of tabs open.
Oh my gosh, a million. We'll do the best we can here. Okay, maybe it's not gonna let me, maybe it's not gonna let me do that. So we'll just start here. I don't want to belabor. First and foremost, thank you all for spending your afternoon with us. It is not lost on me as a small business owner how difficult it is to be able to carve out time for your own professional development. So kudos to you for being here this afternoon. Taylor and I can talk for hours and hours and hours about media relations stuff, PR, the news media, all things related to that topic. So we're excited to do that in front of you this afternoon. So I had the opportunity to present with Taylor about, I think, was it about 6 weeks ago, Taylor? We presented at an Empowerment Network event. For those of you who are familiar with the Empowerment Network, they do conferences pretty much seasonal. And so we had an opportunity to present and adaptate an adaptive version of what you're going to see today, but we've brushed it up just for this audience. And so the goal that we have for you all as small business owners today is to have you leave with a little bit more clarity about what it takes to get your story in front of a reporter on the news so that people know who you are, what you do, why you do it, and what you have to offer. And so that, as you all probably, we all know, right? Like stories, people want to hear about stories. They don't want to necessarily hear about places and things. Stories connect us all emotionally. They give us an opportunity to shape our perception and build on our brand identity. Again, back to people knowing who you are, what you do, why you do it, who you do it for. And when we do a good job of crafting a story and delivering that story, we build trust and engagement. Uh-oh, my slide's not advancing. Okay. So I'm going to start by just sharing a little bit more about my background so that you know a little bit more about me and my career journey, and then we'll turn it over to Ms. Taylor Johnson. Initially, when I embarked upon my career, and for those of you who are here this afternoon, we've got the logo for my PR communication marketing business, which I launched in August of 2019. So I'm right here in this entrepreneurship journey with all of you. But when I went to college, I initially fully expected to be a newspaper reporter. I was the editor of the newspaper at South High, the South High Tutor. If we have any Packers on the call, go Pack. And then I went to undergrad at Midland Lutheran College, very impressed by their journalism program at the time, now Midland University. And so probably right about sophomore year, the more I was learning about the news media and how it worked in the real world, and I was learning about the fact that I may have to cover stories that were crime related, or if there was a fire or something, if that happened at 3 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning and you're the newbie, you're entry level, that's all you. And that's different than high school and college journalism assignments. So that made me a little bit apprehensive about going all into real world journalism. I started to look for some other opportunities, and I discovered public relations. And so from there on, I changed my concentration to advertising and public relations. And the thing that drew me to PR was the fact that you still got to do a lot of the kind of work that you would do if you were a journalist, but you did that for a company or an organization. So I spent the first 12 years of my career in federal government, transitioned into corporate communications. I used to lead communication strategy for Omaha Public Schools, the largest school district in our state. I've taught as a full-time professor. And now I'm here in this journey of entrepreneurship, and I love the opportunity that it brings me to be able to help clients navigate through this world. So that said, I'm going to go ahead and let Taylor open it up and share a little bit about how she got to where she is on her journey.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Monique, for having me with you today. So I am a news anchor and reporter for Channel 6 News here in Omaha. This is my fourth stop in my career journey thus far. So I've worked in Kansas City as a reporter there, Terre Haute, Indiana as a reporter anchor. I did the weather there. I did a little bit of everything at that station. And then I started in digital media at WSET in Lynchburg, Virginia. But it all started as a child. I've always had a love for stories. I've always had a love for storytelling, whether it had to do with watching a Disney movie or being in school plays. I also did a lot of journaling as a kid, writing short stories, things of that nature. And even as an adult, I have like bags and bags of journals just through the years because I just love writing as a way of getting my thoughts out, but also expressing creativity. So as I was getting older, it kind of dawned on me, what could I do to incorporate my love for storytelling as a career? And that's where journalism came into the picture. It started with seeing the weatherman on the news and just being so intrigued about what he was doing and how he was able to, stand on the map and show where the weather conditions were coming from, where the currents were going, things of that nature. I didn't want to do weather because of the science. I'm a writer at heart. And so when I got into middle school, we had a morning announcements fake newscast. So I'm from DC originally, well, the DC area. And so we would read the front page of the Washington Post in front of the school, in front of a camera like I do today. And I just really loved it. And so when I got to high school, I was a part of the newspaper as well, like Monique, we have that in common. And then I went to the University of Maryland, College Park, where I studied broadcast journalism. And at the Philip Merrill College of Journalism, and they really prepared me for what media has become today. I always say I wish that I would have started 30 years ago because back then they had cameramen and they had a lot of help, but now we're doing it ourselves, most of it. And it cracks me up when I go to do stories here in Omaha and people are like, oh my gosh, you're by yourself? You have to do all this on your own? I have the camera, the microphone, the lights. And then when I get back to the station, I have to go through the interview and pick out the sound bites and put the script together, get it approved. Then I have to track it with my news voice, right? And then edit it and then present it on air. It's a lot in one day. But we get it done, we make it work. And so I'm just really grateful to be here today to share with you all because in addition to having that expertise as a storyteller, I find it important to make sure that you as business owners know what to do when you are approached by a journalist, or if you feel you have a story to tell, how to pitch that effectively to us so that we can get your story out. So let's take a look at some of the data here. And this is from the Pew Research Center, which is a very solid source when it comes to journalism trends and what's going on in the media as of today. So in this first statistic, it says 32% of Americans prefer television news in 2024. That number has definitely fallen over the years. Gone are the days of appointment television. We have streaming now. You can get it on your phone through an app, or you can get like the alerts that come on your phone and you can check that way. You can listen to podcasts. There's so many different ways to news gather these days. And a lot of the time when I meet people, they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't watch the news. It's very common. A lot of people don't anymore, but it is still relevant enough for you to use local news as an avenue to share your story and promote what it is that you're doing. 48% of Americans prefer digital pathways to access news. So again, like we were talking about the apps, there's social media, which you want to be careful with sometimes, podcasts, YouTube, there's just so many different ways. And then also 32% of Americans find local news to be very important to the community. 42% say somewhat. And I think that even people saying somewhat is still a good number there because they still find some relevancy to it. I do find that if there is no local news or no local news outlets, it would be very detrimental to a community because you don't know what's going on in your backyard. And also these people that are at your local station, especially those longstanding talent, like these are people you know, and people who sometimes know you. Maybe you've met them in the community and things of that nature. So we can also be advocates for you on the inside if we know your story, if we know who you are. So it's, and I think this is something we'll get into later, but building relationships with reporters and with local news talent can be very, very beneficial as well, because people are still watching. So my question, and if you want to put this in the chat, you can, what is your relationship to the news? A lot of people these days, at least I just hear this on my own, either they feel like they can't trust it or it's too negative, so they don't turn it on at all. Do you feel like news is something that is beneficial to you, just as an everyday person, not as a business owner? How do you feel about it? If you have a not so great attitude toward the news, it might be time to shift your perspective as a business owner, especially if you want to use news outlets to elevate your business.
And I don't see any responses yet in the chat, Taylor, so I'll just keep watching that as we go.
And it's okay if you don't want to say anything, but
Oh, here we got him. We got him. So Deidre says she tries not to listen to the news daily. And Jennifer says, yes, she still thinks we need the news. Deidre says it's because it can be negative. And Shannon says she's been on a news diet since the election.
understandably so. Even I'm like, I wish I would have went on a diet with all the ads. Like, that's all the commercial
my
breaks.
God. It was a lot. Artez said the local news is more valuable.
Agreed. So then how do you get your information? If you're on a news diet, understandably so after the election, or if you have the thought that it is negative because there is a lot of bad news that comes out, how do you stay informed? How do you make sure that you know what's going on around you? And that's just out of curiosity. So how are audiences sharing information? 73% of Americans get their news or info from friends, family, or neighbors, which I found to be a very interesting statistic there. And I'm probably in this number, not me getting the news, but giving it. So my grandmother, she lives in Maryland, right? And I'll call her and say, did you hear about this? Did you hear about that? Valid news stories that she might not have heard of in the moment. And so I'm sharing it with her that way. So that works. She also watches the news as well. So 64% of Americans get their news from television stations. And then 52% of Americans get their news from online forums, social media, radio, podcasts. Monique and I, we listen to the same podcast every morning called Up First by NPR. I was listening to it this. And with Up First, it's just like a nice little bite of just 3 of the major headlines happening today, usually one international, maybe one political. It just all depends, or if something major is going on in a different city. And so that's really my outlet for national news. I'll be honest, I don't really watch CNN or MSNBC because I don't really have cable. So I usually try to stick to the podcast to help me to understand what's going on nationally, or I'll read the websites. So I'll go to CNN.com or NBC.com, or even the nightly news that comes on the basic cable channel. So NBC, ABC. So I see we got some more responses, Monique.
Yeah, Dana is right there with us. She's an NPR person. She said it's her most trusted source for national news. Deirdre said her mom is the one who has to tell her what's on the news because people know. Shout out
part of that 73%.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm sure that you all see yourselves in these numbers. Shout out Sheila Fields. Good afternoon. Sheila said that subscriptions to the sources that are specific to her interests are the ones that she keeps up with. And shout out Shannon Robic. Good to see you on this afternoon. She's an NPR and BBC person. She loves that international perspective on US news.
So something I want to throw in here really quickly, that's not on the slide. It's a new study that I saw yesterday from the Pew Research Center. They did a survey of 10,000 US adults, and they have found that about 1 in 5 Americans regularly get their news from digital influencers who are more likely to be found on social media platform X. This report came out on Monday. And they're also saying that, especially as we're coming off the heels of the election, a lot of people were getting their information from people with huge followings. It was really big in the news that Donald Trump went on the Joe Rogan podcast. Kamala Harris, she had gone on a couple of podcasts as well with people who are not journalists. They
Right.
just have a lot of people who follow them, and so
Right.
people listen to them. So it's interesting to see how the media landscape is changing as well, as far as something as critical as getting out to voters through the media space. They're not going to the normal legacy media. I think it took a long time before Kamala Harris went on 60 Minutes, and 60 Minutes has been around forever, you know.
Forever.
Instead, they're prioritizing where the younger people are, who have the big followings, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. It's really changing, and that's something to also take into consideration for you as well in getting your information out. Even here in Omaha, there are some outlets, Instagram pages, podcasts, and TikToks that might be useful for you as well.
Especially we're talking about hyper local, and you make a great point, Taylor, because often, I mean, and back to your point that media is still part of this whole mix of reaching the audience, but these personalities, right, like political, sometimes we're talking about celebrities, they're intentionally going where their audience is, and that's not necessarily always like a local or major media outlet either. So great point there.
Yeah, and when you and I did our last presentation for Empowerment Network, there was a young man in there. I believe he's still in high school. And so I asked him, where does he like to find his news? And he says that he wants to see it on like TikTok or Instagram Reels. Um, so, and he's the next generation. So it's getting interesting. So here are just some examples of ways that you can get your business out there. You have TV news, we mentioned podcasts, social media, blogs, and even print. You know, we have the magazines here with the Midlands Business Journal. We have Omaha Magazine. The World Herald is still around. Social media, there are pages that promote businesses. There are some podcasts out. I know that Omapod is one. And of course, you have your local television stations as well.
So for the chat, we'd love to hear which is your favorite outlet and why from the choices on the screen. And we'll keep advancing. So TV news, podcast, social media, blogs, print. If you have your top choice, which one is it? And I'll keep monitoring the chat.
So which media source is right for you? Not all forms of media will work for you in your business, and that is okay. So finding at least 2 or 3 that get you the results that you want should be your goal. The good news is that most media coverage is free, but you may also want to consider investing in advertising. The thing with television news and television stations, we all have different brands, and we all have different goals for our news coverage. And so what might work for KETV might not work for WOWT. One advantage that some of these stations might have are like lifestyle shows, or what we call like pay for play. And I don't really know if we have any here. I know we don't have one, but that's a way to kind of get yourself there where you can talk more about your business without it necessarily having to be a story. And sometimes those pay for play opportunities, you do have to invest. There is a Instagram page called Omaha Places, where they share like different events or different businesses around, and they have a really strong following, but you would have to pay to get placement on their page. But for the news, and as Monique touched on in the very beginning, you want to tell a story. You want to talk about people. You want to say, how can I make this topic interesting? For example, Nebraska Medicine had come to me with a story idea about telehealth and how we're getting into cold and flu season, and they have this option for people to come and use their online system to see a doctor if you feel like you have a cough or whatever and you can't get in to see your physical physician. So that's useful information, yes. But what makes it enough to capture a person's attention? And so one of the ways that they did so is that they brought me a person who used this feature before. And his story was that he was on a cruise, and it kind of sounded like back in 2020. He was on a cruise and he came home and found out he had COVID. And so he couldn't see his doctor, and he used this telehealth feature. So kind of bringing in that personal testimonial and how it served him, in addition to hearing the talking head, which would be the doctor, the expert. It kind of gave it more color. It kind of gave it more flavor. But then also me as a journalist, that's when I put my feels in there as well to make it a little bit more attention grabbing. So I think my first line was, after spending days in his form of paradise, so-and-so came back feeling miserable. And it's like, oh, well, what's that about? And then we go into his story, which then takes it into what it's really about, which is this telehealth feature. So you really want to dig deep into what your story is and how you can tell it using a customer, or maybe you had a personal experience that brought out your need to start this business venture. I've had stories like that where you can be the character and you can be the expert too. So you just really have to dig deep and discover that.
For sure. And that's a great, it's a great piggyback to the next part of what we're going to cover. And it is about how you craft that compelling narrative. And so I'm going to just ask Taylor to piggyback as I move through the remainder of the slides that we have for you this afternoon. But first and foremost, starting with authenticity, right? Like for you as a business owner, you knowing your why and your personal passion behind what you do and being able to relay that to a PR person, if you have PR support, and or to the media directly when you're pitching something, is crucial. Your passion, when it shines through and shows through, is very helpful in putting together a story that will resonate with others. Your voice, right? Like how has your background shaped your narrative and who you are? How did you come to this place? And so bridging that personal story to your professional relevance is going to connect with people. Sometimes when we think about businesses, it's all about the service and what can be offered to the customer. But specifically, I know with millennials often want to know the why. They want to know that you're cause oriented. They don't want to only know about what you're selling. They want to know how you're helping to benefit society and the world as a whole. So starting with your own authenticity is crucial. Storytelling, again, just to reiterate what Taylor has shared, you've got to come to the media with that story essentially already packaged. Help paint the picture for them so they can help understand, so you can help them understand why this is a story that's important for the community to be aware of. And so I will give an example. When we're thinking about storytelling, we want to think about how we can tap the 5 senses. I teach undergraduate for University of Texas at Austin. I teach undergraduate public relations. It's a techniques course. And so as part of like about the first 5 modules, and Taylor got to be featured in one of those too. We did a whole video to help students understand how to put together stories that stick, how to understand news values. And one of the essential ingredients of that is characters. And you've already hit on that. So I help them envision like this iron triangle, if you will, when we think about storytelling. This iron triangle, think about even like what your absolute favorite movie is, that movie that you've watched like 10 to 15 times. I have one actually that I watched last night while I was making dinner, and my husband said, "Haven't you already seen this movie before?" It's called Unstoppable. And it was about the train that almost went into a number of towns in Pennsylvania a good number of years back. It stars Denzel Washington, Rosario Dawson. But it's a crisis management story. It's a crisis communication story, but it has all the characters. It had these two, just very normal men that either of us could relate to. A guy who was working and near the end of retirement, he gets laid off, and then he's put into this situation where now he has to be the hero. So it's a story that we can all relate to. The victims are going to be this town. The victims are the people themselves who have to like stop this train from running into this very populated town. The villains are like the corporation who was trying to make a decision about whether to derail this train or not. It was going to be millions of dollars lost if they did it, but loss of life was also at risk. So think about even in your own stories that you're pitching, like who are the characters? Where's the iron triangle? Not that it has to be like Hollywood sensationalized, but can you see all of those pieces coming together in a way that is going to grab attention and be interesting to the audience? And then my second point here is one of the questions that I asked Taylor when we did the video for my undergraduate students was, is the press release dead? And so for those of you who may not be familiar with what I'm referencing when I say the press release, that's a very basic templated structure that any of you could use to email media reporter or media outlets to make them aware of your event. Let's say you're doing a ribbon cutting. Let's say you're going to do a turkey giveaway for Christmas. It is essentially it's foundational media one-on-one, the who, what, where, when, why, and the how, to get their attention. And Taylor told me, no, the press release is not dead. The newsroom depends on them. However, you've got to write yours in a way that helps reporters understand whether they should delete it and put it in the trash box or explore it further, because there's enough of those storytelling and news value pieces there to do something with it. So when
There's
you're
a
trying
number of them that I ignore because they're just not relevant. And that's too why you have to know who you're pitching, and do a little bit of research about, what they are looking for, because if it doesn't fit, we got to move on.
Yeah, I want you to take this slide because this is where you sit, and I'm often the person that's trying to grab Taylor Johnson's attention or one of the other reporters in the newsroom. So how do we do this well? The bullet points on the screen, Taylor.
I think one of the best ways is to come with timeliness. And one thing that Monique and I have talked about with this presentation in the past is if your business is relevant to a certain awareness month or awareness week or something like that, like that's really a good time to kind of slide in there, because we're looking for those stories. And local news is all about time. So sometimes we get press releases where an event happened the day before, and then they send us a press release the next day, like, oh, we had blah, 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 yesterday. Here's some pictures and videos. We're probably not going to run that because it already happened, right? So you want to, if it's an event you want to promote, you might want to get ahead of it. What is a story that you could tell beforehand that could, in the end, help us to push people to, if you want to sign up to attend this event or it's happening on such and such day, go to our website to get more information. And then also the human element. A lot of the times we're not going to tell a story if we don't have at least two voices. So maybe an expert voice, and that could be you as the business owner, and that human person, that character. And you don't want it to be just somebody, like Monique said, it doesn't have to be like a Hollywood production. You don't want to pull anybody that doesn't have actual relevancy to your business or the story that you're trying to tell. But you want it to have authenticity. And also you want to, again, like I mentioned, tailor your pitch to who the audience is. I will say
which is not the media, right? Like it's not Taylor. It is who can relate to, the city of Omaha is going to switch trash vendors. Sounds real exciting, right? Got to get covered on the local news. How do we put together a story with the characters? How does that impact the average person?
Yeah, or like, and that's the thing, impact, that's the word. And that's what Channel 6 really looks for. I don't know if any of you watch Channel 6, but we recently changed over our branding this week. So now we are First Alert 6. And their big thing is we want impact, impact, impact. How is this affecting the everyday person? How is this maybe appealing to a person's emotions? Will it make them want to take action? Is it something that impacts their safety? Is it something that impacts their money? Is it something that impacts their daily life? Whatever it is that you're bringing to the table, how can it I guess translate over the airwaves so that people know like this is something that I need in my life, or this is something that I need to pay attention to, or that we say we need to do this story. How is it solving problems? What solutions is it bringing to the community? And also building long-term relationships with reporters. I have a number of people that I've met through networking events, and I think that also reporters can do a better job too of going out to the community to meet people where they are as well. Because a lot of the stories that I have gotten that have been some of my favorite stories have been through me going to events. I saw Artez in the chat. Like I met Artez through the Midlands African Chamber, and we've been in talks about potentially doing a story about his business at some point in time. So building relationships is important because also when we know your story, even if you can't best articulate it yourself, I can go to my bosses because I know what they're looking for and be able to shape it in a way that they approve the pitch so we can do the story. So that's always a good thing to do, is to try to get to know the reporters in your community, the anchors too, because we can also help you. If you, because and even for me as a reporter, it can be challenging to pitch on my own, but so I can only imagine how difficult it can be for people who don't have this sort of experience. So if we have that connection, then we can work together in that way.
So Taylor, WOWT, First Alert News, that's the new tagline?
First Alert 6.
First Alert 6, gotcha. So if you don't mind taking this away too, because this is spot on.
Okay. So news you can use, balancing hard news with human stories. And honestly, sometimes with breaking news, there can be human interest. Like maybe it's a breaking headline off the top. And then, for instance, we can use COVID as an example, right? The big breaking news is that there is this illness that is all over the world, killing people with the shelter in place. But then on top of it, there were so many human stories underneath, people having to shut down their businesses, family members who their loved one contracted the illness and passed away. Like, how is this impacting them? It kind of brings a face to what's going on. In newsrooms, we do need a better balance between breaking news and human interest stories. I went to a conference over the summer, the NABJ, so the National Association of Black Journalists, and I was talking with some news directors from like the bigger cities about, just promoting myself to them. And so the first question they asked is, what news do you like to tell? And so I tell them I like community-based stories. So these human interest stories. And I swear to you, I feel like I lost every single one of them as soon as I said that. They want hard news. They want breaking news. That's it bleeds, it leads. Like that's what these news stations want. But at the same time, when we looked at the responses in the chat, a lot of people don't want to see that all the time. A lot of people don't like that all the time. So it has been a challenge in trying to create that balance as a reporter, but I do find ways to maneuver based on our branding principles to get the human interest stories in there so that it makes the managers happy, but then also we can still tell those community-based stories because that's what people want to see. People want to know what's going on in their communities that are good, or even if it is something that is somewhat negative. I've done a number of stories recently about health disparities in the Black community. Well, we have organizations in North Omaha, or we have doctors or whomever that are doing research or creating programming and things of that nature to address those issues. These are who those people are. So I think that kind of brings a human interest in with the hard news as well.
And to your point, Taylor, I know I've had news directors tell me, because I'm sitting here thinking, oh, if we have a fire in the city and it's a 3 alarm or something, it's going to eat up a lot of news time for that day. But I've had news directors say, still call us though, because we need something to break that up. If we've got something really cool happening at a school that day, please call us, because you've got the up and down cycle, right? Like you got the, if it bleeds, it leads, but we got to lift people back up, just like a good story does, or a good movie, again, as an example.
We got a good question here from Beth. How far in advance do you pitch your news stories in terms of timeliness? So honestly, we pitch stories the day of. So the sooner that if you know you want some coverage, the sooner that you can reach out to me, the better. And also things change, like how Monique was talking about a 3 alarm fire. I could have your story as my pitch for the day, and then all crap breaks loose in the city and we pivot and we have to drop it for the day, but it'll still be there that maybe I could do it the next day. So let me also add to that, timeliness is important, but it's also not bad to have stories that we call evergreen that could run at any time. So if we have the big breaking story and we have to drop everything, that it could still go on to the next day. And also I want to add to, when you do pitch, make sure you're prepared for us to come. So not only do we need characters, not only do we need you, but we also need something to see. TV news is a visual medium. So if you have a business where maybe you have like a restaurant or something, be prepared, because we're going to want to shoot you working in the kitchen or serving your customers.
Have that kitchen ready.
Yes, have the kitchen ready. Also, on top of that, maybe you have a business that's not necessarily as visual. Maybe give us some pictures, just something that we can use to make it visual. There have been instances where I have reached out to people that I saw something that maybe they posted on LinkedIn or Facebook, and I thought it would make a good story, and I go to them and they're not ready to go. I can't do anything with that. And then it also puts me in a pickle, because then I have to find something else to fill the time that night. So being prepared is really important, and also not putting too much pressure in what you're going to say. Have your talking points, that's great, but don't try to memorize what you're going to say. We're just having a conversation. We're just sitting, we're talking. The camera just happens to be there. Because if you're so focused on saying something right or what have you, it can mess the whole thing up. And we only take a few bites. You only see about 10 seconds. If I use you two times, you might get like maybe 20 seconds the entire time. And
that would be a lot. That's a lot.
That's a lot, right? So you want to be able to articulate yourself in a way that we can use it. And I know public speaking is not for everybody. It is hard, but if you're the face of your business, if you're promoting your business, it's something you have to practice and get more comfortable with. But the good news is that it's never a live interview when we come to you. We just chop it up. So if something doesn't sound so great, we might take it out. But yeah, you want to just kind of take the edge off a little bit, take a deep breath, and let's just chat.
For sure. So I have this next slide here. When we did the presentation at Empowerment Network, because we were sharing with the audience just what it's like to work in this field day in and day out. But again, we're speaking to entrepreneurs, same kind of life, right? Like daily, it is a grind. You got to look into the future. You got to forecast. You got to figure out where that revenue is coming from. So these tips are relevant for you as well. And again, when I interviewed Taylor to put this information in front of my undergraduate students, we commiserated on like what the stress can do to you, right? Like, so I literally remember a point in my career where your body will start, well, more than one point, your body will start to respond if you keep going and don't stop and take a rest in these fields. And so listen to that, business owners. Your learning never stops as an entrepreneur, and you've got to understand enough to be dangerous in a lot of areas. And so Taylor and I just shared our tips with my undergrads about how we do self-care. So I'll be quick for mine. I'm a huge morning routine person to keep myself built up. I think of that like as a capital bucket. So if I have in the morning an hour where I can at least get my workout in, I can listen to my Up First podcast. I do that at the end. I do it at the end of the hour. I do not consume news first thing in the morning. I had to learn that. But I still need and want to know what's going on in the world. But I try to have my quiet time. I do frequent walk breaks throughout the day. But it's so important to me, and I learned the hard way, to pour into myself before I pour out, and just setting boundaries. An example for me is having a light day of the week. Fridays for me is Friday afternoons are usually my time that I have blocked. It has to be something very important to be able to squeeze into my Friday afternoon. But I really, again, learned the hard way how important it is to pour in first so that I can have something to pour out. So I'll let you add to that, Taylor, if you have anything additional.
And I have a lot of similar ways that I take care of myself. I will say when I am not at work that I do try to stay away from the news as well. Whatever is going on, I'll catch up with it when I get back to work. There are some people in this business who are glued to the news 24/7, 365. And while I respect that, it's like, okay, you have to have a life of your own as well. So on my days off, I exercise. I'm trying to do better at least taking one of my days off to do little to nothing, because working this job is so fast paced. And then there are other things that I do in the community as well, where it's like, okay, you need to just slow down a little bit and take care of yourself. And to be honest, I watch a lot of Bravo programming. I love the Real Housewives. So I take care of myself that way too.
Listen, you got to get it in where you can get it in. The other relevant point that we thought was important to leave with you all is, and these are just some things we do. Again, you're doing it, right? Like to be here this afternoon, to carve out the time to take in a webinar that's going to help you have additional insight as a business owner on how to work with media when that time comes for you. But we do the same thing, like Taylor has mentioned, getting to National Association of Black Journalists Conference and being able to glean a lot from that in relationships. I'm squad goals on that, Taylor. Maybe next summer. I can get there. I'm been a member of Public Relations Society of America for years. I digest LinkedIn learning videos when they're relevant and I'm trying to learn something new. I read a lot, and I'm a voracious audiobook and podcast listener. It's important to keep up with the trends, especially in this industry. It's constantly and consistently evolving. For me, this is year 23, and I remember standing at a fax machine, entering numbers one by one, 100 of them, just to send out a press release. So we have gone leaps and bounds in terms of growth as an industry, and with AI on the horizon, and consistently changing and emerging, we've got to make sure that we're keeping pace. And so I think that there was a point that you made that I pulled this bullet in, Taylor, when you talked about just getting better and better all the time and how to grow from feedback, especially when you're in a space that you don't know well.
Yeah, absolutely. And even when you are in that space, like you said, things are always changing. And also, at least for me, from like a news talent perspective, even going to like the next level, different stations have different expectations, and which will, cause me to have to make some improvements or things of that nature, or change my delivery or how I tell stories, only to, make me a better journalist and to also, reach that audience. And also to the point of keeping up with digital trends and changing media landscapes. I am reading articles every single day because these changes really, I mean, they impact me and what the future of my career could look like, being in the traditional media space. So I would say now is not really a time to sleep on what's going on in media, especially if you want to use it as a tool to advance and elevate your business, to really pay attention to what's happening.
For certain. So folks, I think we're coming to the end of our time together before we give the floor over to open up the microphone and allow you to ask us any questions that you have for us. And we do hope that you feel like you're leaving with some valuable takeaways. And we just want to remind you, think about your journey, like what brought you to entrepreneurship? What story can you tell that the media will be interested in helping to share with our local community? Cultivate those relationships with media where you get the opportunity. As Taylor mentioned, she's out in the community. Make sure that you take the time to introduce yourself to her, quickly tell her about who you are, what you do. That could blossom into a story opportunity later, and keep refining your storytelling skills. Build yourself up as a trusted communicator. That said, we are ready, Tanya, if you're there, to answer any questions that our audience maybe has for us.
Yes, and just a reminder, everyone, to just throw them in the chat and we'll get them answered.
We got them quiet like the undergrads. Oh, not long, not for long.
Uh, Beth asked, how many times do you pitch a story or follow up before you move on?
That is a good question. So, and that's why it's important to build relationships with reporters, because if it's something that's made that you might send to the general email to the newsroom, like news@wowt.com, it'll get lost in translation because we get so many emails sent out to us a day. But if you pitched it to me and we talked about it, if I personally will find a time to make it work. For example, there's a story that I wanted to do today, but I won't be able to do because there's an update in the city race for mayor that I have to go and cover instead. But there is still space for me to do it in maybe not next week or maybe a couple of weeks afterwards. So if it's a story that I'm passionate about, that we've talked about, we can find ways to bring it back up. It's more so, I would say, on me being strategic with the news of the day. So it just all depends.
Awesome.
How
And
do
then,
you-
yeah, Dana asked, how do you build relationships when your media personalities and producers change frequently in small markets?
That's a good question too. That does happen. I would say it wouldn't hurt to build relationships with the anchors, because most of the time the anchors, they stick around for a while, and our anchors do report as well. So that could be a good way to go because they have a little bit more longevity than reporters do. And then it's also okay to build the relationships with those who are maybe only here for 2 or 3 years, because I mean that is still a good amount of time to get your story told, not once or twice. While that person is there, or more times than that. So, but I would say maybe start with the anchors there.
The only other thing I would add to that, and it depends on how your business is structured, but we are a PR firm that we can work with clients across the nation, and we have counterparts in every state across the US. So there have certainly been times where I pitched to a reporter that started here in Omaha and might now be in Cleveland, Ohio, or in Miami. So I like to keep those relationships as those reporters climb their career ladder, because we still know and remember each other from working together here in Omaha. So for those of you who are working across the nation, maybe think about that too.
Yeah. So
Then, sorry to interrupt.
hear from Shannon and Dana. I could probably answer those together. About Lincoln and Omaha.
Oh, yes.
So now Dana, where she says we lost the whole anchor team at NTV, they went to just reporters. Channel 3 here in Omaha has done something similar. So they are mostly relying on reporters and anchors. And that's another reason to kind of pay attention to what's happening in the landscape and thinking of other mediums that you can use to promote your business and share what you're doing, because broadcast is getting very weird right now. I'm starting to see in other places that, and even the company that I work for, they got rid of staff at one entire news station in Alabama, in one region of Alabama, and then joined them with another region of Alabama. So now they're doing regional news instead of hyper local. So it's really changing, and that could happen in other places, going to just reporters. And as far as like overlap for business news reaching Lincoln and Omaha, I would say that they would be separate. We do have a sister station in Lincoln, 1011, I believe is what it's called. And sometimes we'll take some stuff from them, but it's mostly about the Huskers, what's happening at the State House, or if there's like some drastic breaking news situation that happened in Lincoln and vice versa. So if you are covering both of those areas with your business, then you might want to make relationships in both cities.
Perfect. And I know Michaela, so she's said, I'm new to a local nonprofit, so I very much appreciate the info. What is the best way to get in contact and pitch a story? An example, our company is doing an sorry, open house, and coverage might be a good idea. How would I get in contact with you or another journalist?
I'm going to put my email in here. You can send pitches directly to me. And then you could also send pitches to that email, and other stations have general emails like that as well. I will say, for me in my role, I only report 3 days a week. So I can't cover everything, but just based on time constraints. But sometimes we could pass stories on. And like with that general news email, usually they'll put something in the planner that we have, so if people want to cover it, people can kind of pick up on it and decide if they want to make that their story for the day.
I
Perfect.
see a question from Dana about this is it sounds like an amazing story too, from life support to purpose, and she created all natural skincare products. But then she talks about, right, I've had lots of introverts in my undergraduate course, Dana, so I have to teach them how to come out of their shell. The other thing that I might recommend for you is that you might be a good candidate to actually work with a PR firm to get you media trained, to pitch the stories for you. Depending on, and it doesn't have to be Avant Solutions, but I do have my email in the chat, even to do like an initial consultation, which you might learn from that. And then you can make a decision about whether you want to just take the tips and do DIY or get some additional support.
Perfect. And then Sheila said, how do you gauge what's credible? Should we look for specific credentials when you're selecting a news source? How do news outlets decide what to report when trying to be first to report versus accurate?
Well, that's when ethics come in, and every news organization is different. So like for us, we might hear about something that is newsworthy, but if we don't have, say there was, I don't know, like a shooting or something, we heard about it on the scanner, right? The scanner is not exactly the source that we want to attribute it to. So we wouldn't go running with it if we heard initially that there's a shooting without hearing from Omaha police that this did indeed happen. Because just because you might hear something that is sensational or that is breaking and going with it, but not having anything to necessarily back it up, that's when credibility can become can kind of get in the way. Because what if it turns out that it was a false alarm and we reported that you know, there was a shooting in a certain part of town, because we went off of what we heard on the scanner or saw on the Omaha scanner page, even though a lot of the time the Omaha scanner has things that is actually happening, but we have to go through the police department or, you know, just a credible source to back us up. So how do news outlets report when trying to be the report? So accuracy should always be the most important thing. So if you have the reputable source to back you up, that creates the accuracy and you get it out first, then you hit both nails on the head. But most of the time, at least for me, it's more important to be right than to be first, because you could be first and be wrong when you don't have all the details. And then when selecting a news source, I would say that it's just all about you gauging your own personal feeling toward that news outlet. Because a lot of the times we report the same things, right? But do you feel connected to that news station? Do you feel connected to their branding or the types of stories that we're telling? And then also you can look at individuals as well, individual reporters and anchors. And that's why we kind of stress getting to know us if you can, when you can, to kind of determine that as well, if they feel credible enough to you to share their story, or you can watch stories that they've done in the past to see how they've told it and if it's something that is in line with you and your values as well. Because not every news station is for everyone. That's why people, you know, kind of pick who they want to watch based on how that station speaks to them or relates to them. Hopefully that makes sense.
For sure. Tanya, if it's okay, I'm going to do one more screen just because I would be remiss if whenever I'm in front of a captive audience, I don't talk about being a first-time book author. And when we first got started today, because Taylor got a copy of the book when we presented at Empowerment Network. So I'm gonna let her do the commercial since she's like, she's reading it. But there's a QR code on the screen. And for those of you who are interested, I can get you a free code if you want to listen for free, if you don't mind doing a review. So just email me. My email's in the chat if you're interested in that.
Yes. So Monique's book, Chart Your Path, a 9-step method to getting unstuck, has been very beneficial for me. I haven't finished it yet, but what I've read so far, I'm already just underlining, taking notes in my notebook, because for me, I have so many ideas and visions in my mind of other paths that I want to pursue, but sometimes I can feel a little stuck based on maybe my own mindset or current circumstances, where I feel like, oh, how can I get to this point? How can I make this happen? And I mean, there's already just a lot of gems in this book that are helping me to unleash myself from being in that area of being stuck. And one of the biggest things is always, like, even being on this webinar today, like, how does anyone look at me as an expert in something? Like, I still feel like I'm a kid sometimes, you know? But it's also, I think, people seeing the value that you have as well. And I'm grateful to Monique for bringing me on with her to share in this way, because it also kind of gives you that validation of, you know what, I do have something to say that's valuable and important to others. And I think this book will really help you to get to that place.
Thank you for that. And you're in it day in and day out. So definitely you're the expert to help us understand how we navigate our local media. So thank you for agreeing to be here. Okay, Tanya, I think it's all yours.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for presenting today. Very much appreciate all the knowledge you can share with us and all our attendees. And so just to kind of wrap us up here, I wanted to put in a plug about our Market Tech Conference happening on March 25th and 26th. Registration is live. And so I highly encourage you to check that out, secure your spot now. And it's very fastly approaching. We're already almost in December, it feels like. So encourage you to join us for our day and a half conference. I also host open office hours here at Grow Nebraska for any prospective people, as well as our members. And so feel free to check out what days and times are available there. And then I do encourage you to follow us on social media to stay informed about everything happening at Grow Nebraska, as well as with our members throughout the state. And then if you would kindly leave us a Google review to let us know what your thoughts are on today's training. Let us know that you hopped on Monique and Taylor's training today. And then I'm also sending a link here in the chat with the other links that I mentioned earlier towards the beginning. And then if you ever have any questions or topic suggestions, please just feel free to contact me as well. And so, yes, thank you once again, Monique and Taylor. I'm very appreciative of you guys taking time out of your day and coming to teach us all your knowledge. So if that, I don't see any other questions. So I hope everyone has a great rest of their Thursday.
Thank you, Tanya. It's always a fun time. Looking forward to January. See you then.
Yes, see ya. Bye.